Hello, everyone. It is that time of the week, the Cannabis Events Talk Show with Event High, and I'm your host, Adelia Carrillo. For those that are new here, the Cannabis Events Talk Show covers all about cannabis events, experiences, and tourism. We keep you updated on all the hottest topics, from current news, trends, interviews with special guests, to marketing tips, and so much more. Now, the lineup of the show. We invite a special guest each week, and first start off with a interview segment highlighting that guest and also gaining some insight and advice and tips from them. Then we'll discuss an article of the week, touching in on either cannabis tourism, consumption, hospitality, or travel and events as a whole. After that, I usually just end the show with your favorite event day, your event of the week. And we also will highlight who is the upcoming guest for next week's show. So enough of that. With that being said, I am excited to introduce you all to this week's guest, Madlyne Kelly. She is the co-owner of Irie Weddings and Events. Madlyne comes from a graphic design and compliance background, having spent many years at the Colorado Medical Marijuana Registry. Multiple businesses later, Madlyne has honed her skills as an entrepreneurial multi-high night in the cannabis event space with a passion for responsible social consumption education. With that being said, welcome, Madlyne. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, I gave a little bit of a short, bio introduction, but let's dive in a little bit more. Please share a little bit more about your backstory and how you actually, came into cannabis.
Yeah, so I started working in the cannabis space in 2010 here in Colorado at their medical marijuana registry. So I was responsible for printing those medical marijuana cards, coordinating with physicians and making sure that they were still in good standing, as well as customer service for all of our 115,000 medical patients here in Colorado. So helping them with the process. And then we also, right before my daughter was born, before I left the registry, we took them digital. So it was taking approximately 30 to 35 days for them to process medical applications on paper. And we built out a digital system, and we were able to take that processing time down to 3 days, which was really, really great. So that was my first venture into the cannabis space on the medical regulatory side. And then after the birth of my daughter, I reached out to a few different businesses on the recreational side. I didn't want to go back to the state side. I thought the recreational side would be way more fun. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to a few businesses, and my now business partner back then answered and said, "Oh my God, yes, I need some help from somebody who understands compliance and what they're doing." So yeah, that started a long time ago.
Yeah. And so, with that, that's when you met your current business partner. How did it evolve into Irie Weddings and Events?
That's a long story. So we started off as two different companies. Okay. We were Buds and Blossoms, which is where we were taking cannabis and adding it to floral arrangements. Mm-hmm. And then the wedding planning side and the service side was Cannabis Concierge Events. So back then we were helping people elope from, people living in foreign countries, people living in other states, prohibition states. So right after recreational, from 2014 to 2016, we were really focused on intimate elopements, trying to figure out what it was couples were going to want as far as infusing their weddings and infusing their services. So we started with couples and elopements and kind of serving them their favorite edibles and putting the cannabis into the florals. But we quickly noticed that people didn't know what cannabis friendly venues existed. They didn't know what could they consume? Could their guests, if they had any guests, small witnesses for those elopements, if they had guests, could they consume, and how did that work? So we quickly noticed that there was a need for that. So we stepped kind of away from the planning and the florals, and we rebranded as Irie Weddings and Events, and we focused on just the cannabis service. Mm-hmm. Because that's what people were really lacking most. And we transitioned from, those more intimate elopements into the larger weddings of 100, 200, 700 people. So it quickly became a scalable model where people were able to share it with their guests, regardless of how many people they had. And if some of their guests didn't want to consume, they don't have to, just like the alcohol bar. So, we've pivoted a lot, especially with the pandemic. That was a nice 1.5 to 2 year pivot and pause, where we really were able to refine our back end, hire a lot more staff, and kind of grow throughout that pause, which was really great because a lot of businesses as we know had to shut down, and to have maintained 25% of our current clientele, maintaining 25% of our normal business during the pandemic was still felt good, still felt kind of impressive. So
that's very impressive, very impressive. And on top of that too, you mentioned you've been in the industry for a long time, and Irie Weddings too, that you've been around for 8 years now.
Yep. We started right after recreational in that 2014 stage where we were focusing on those elopements. Yep. And ever since then, we've just been honing in on that bar and figuring out what do clients really want to serve their guests? What do guests really want to consume? What are they afraid of consuming? Because at weddings and events in people's lives, that's so different than outside of an industry event or outside of an event where people are coming to that event because they can consume. That drives a different clientele than at a wedding or an event where you have all of your family and friends there, whether they smoke or not. So it's a really interesting opportunity to get a lot of people out of the closet, or to get people out of their comfort zone and out of that fear mindset that they can't try it in a small regulated serving. So we really, really love that experience. And that's why we wanted to just kind of focus in on that and really provide an opportunity for as many first-time consumers to feel comfortable as possible. So we've had over 300 first-time consumers since we started in 2014 consume with us for the first time or the first time in a long time. So that feels pretty good to be able to be that safe and secure environment for people. So that's what we've been focusing on since then, is kind of carving out that little space within a wedding or an event for people to feel comfortable.
Now, I know this isn't on my list, but you mentioned, the growth within the past 2 years. You're multi-state now, right? You have team members working in multiple states. Can you share how many states you're in now?
Yeah, so we have a few different branches. We have Los Angeles and San Francisco, both in California. We have Denver, Colorado. We have Detroit, Michigan, and then we also have Boston, Massachusetts. So we have a lot of team members all over the country ready to go. And Denver was a really great market because it's a craft market. It's it's so maybe I'm biased, but I love Denver. It's a really craft and experiential market is the word I'm looking for. Everybody they don't want to just consume cannabis. They want to do something while they're consuming cannabis. So over the years, we've hosted a bunch of different charity events that were murder mysteries and French galas and all these different fun, interactive, themed and immersive events to hopefully get people, really involved in the activity as well as enjoying the cannabis that's present too.
We have so Jake's tuning in. He said, hopefully Phoenix will be on that list soon.
Yes, Phoenix is a branch that we're currently in the process of building out. We're really, really excited to serve Phoenix too.
Well, I'm here now, so anything you need, just reach out. Now, so with you, as you've produced events, you work with a lot of event organizers as well as you provide certain services for their events. What are 3 tips you would like to share with the event host community?
Awesome. So my 3 biggest tips are all surrounding alcohol and your timeline. So if you're going to have alcohol present at your event, great, awesome. But really consider holding back on the shots, holding back on the harder liquor, and focusing on beer, wine, champagne, or those lighter beverages. That really helps with dual consumption of cannabis and alcohol, as well as starting your alcohol bar and your cannabis bar at the same time. Sometimes we notice that when you start the alcohol bar first and people are allowed to drink for a certain amount of time before the cannabis bar opens, that can be a recipe for disaster because they're already a little feeling loose and good, so they may not be as cognizant about their own cannabis consumption, and they may not be as clear in terms of communicating with our staff as far as what they've consumed before, how much water and food they've had, all those good things that we like to chat about before we serve them. So that would be my second tip is starting the alcohol bar and the cannabis bar at the same time. And then lastly would be to hire a professional. A lot of people at cannabis events either want guests to consume on their own, or they want, someone who's not insured to do this, to be running the cannabis bar, or having, if it's a sponsored event where you have sponsors, cannabis company sponsors, yes, their staff is probably trained to a certain extent to serve those products, but hiring an actual cannabis bartending service is going to be your best bet, because we're going to communicate with your alcohol bartenders, we're going to communicate with your planner and your day of organizers, and make sure that guests are not over consuming, and make sure nobody's having an adverse reaction. And if your alcohol bartenders are going to cut somebody off for being too rowdy, then we're going to do the same thing. So having those open lines of communication really, really helps.
I love that. And that's, again, going into one of the things I just find so impactful about what you all do at Irie Weddings is how you always go back to safe consumption. Which ways, and I was reading your website and I found some even more interesting ways that maybe you'll share, but what ways do you incorporate safety consumption throughout for the training for your teams and at these events?
Yeah, so state recommended servings in all of the recreational states that we service, they're 10 milligrams for edibles and drinkables. And honestly, that's just way too high. For first-time consumers or people who haven't consumed in a long time, 10 milligrams can be a lot, especially in a social setting. Maybe they haven't been eating or drinking enough water, or they've been consuming alcohol as well. So in a social setting, 10 milligrams can be a lot, especially if people are prone to anxiety attacks or feeling lethargic and things like that. So we cut all serving sizes down either to a half or a quarter. So flower serving sizes are 1 gram, but that's a pretty hefty joint, even for a consistent consumer. So for a first-time consumer, that's a lot of cannabis. So we pack all of our cones to be between a quarter and a third of a gram in terms of serving sizes. That's perfect for, a couple puffs for someone. They can share it with their partner, but not with everybody else, because we're focusing on those single servings to keep it nice and sanitary. It's another way we keep people safe. And we focus on those single servings so that people can keep coming back to the bar, because I want to see them every time they come back. I want to see those small servings and gauge how they're feeling and how they're doing. Because if they're showing signs of overconsumption, then we're going to talk about hitting the CBD water station instead of another joint, and we're gonna get them feeling to a good place. So we have the opportunity to really educate people, so that the next time they are consuming on their own outside of our purview, they are practicing it in a safe way as well. People tend to know their own alcohol limits if they've had multiple drinks before, but if you don't know what you don't know, and if you haven't tried cannabis before, you may not know. So small servings are definitely a way that we keep people safe from over consuming, as well as germs from sharing. And then the other way that we really hold a safe environment for people is through our adverse reaction kit. So we make sure that people are, if they have an adverse reaction to a specific terpene, if they, if they've never tried cannabis before and they don't know that it gives them a panic attack, then they're not going to know that. So being able to have our adverse reaction kit, which has all kinds of non-prescription, over-the-counter homeopathic remedies that guests can self-administer so that they can get to feeling like normal again. It doesn't remove the THC from their system, obviously. The only thing that does that is time, but it can make them feel a little bit more balanced, less uncomfortable, if they have something that their body didn't agree with.
I think that's so important. I love that component. At weddings as a whole, like the event coordinator usually has some kit for themselves in general, like a sewing kit, all those little extra things. This is important for the consumption component for sure.
Yep. This is our version of that. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, why do you think, actually Sophie is also tuning in, and she says also hope to see you all in San Diego. So there's obviously states and cities that want you.
Yes.
Why do you think events are important for the industry?
So we used to market to the cannabis industry a long time ago. We used to really focus on cannabis companies and their events and wanting to be there for that. We quickly learned that the cannabis industry doesn't need our education. They know what they're serving. They know what they're consuming because they're most likely avid consumers if they work in this space. So we quickly realized that that's not who needs our services. That's not who needs us. That's not how we can make an impact. So we started focusing on the events space and focusing on weddings and focusing on, bringing that kind of staunchly traditional industry up with the times and like, hey, there's just trend out here, and a lot of people like to unwind with cannabis instead of alcohol. Why shouldn't this be a part of someone's big day? If they don't drink and they want to relax on one of the most stressful days of their lives, they should be able to. So that was kind of like the beginning of the impact that we were able to see was those clients and making them feel accepted and happy on their big days. But then as we grew and as we started talking to more and more guests and more people at their events, we started to realize that it kind of had this ripple effect where we had two super conservative East Coast doctors who attended their niece's wedding, and this bride warned us about them. She said, they're not going to like you. They voted against cannabis for medical and recreational. They're not going to like you. So just steer clear of them. And we were kind of like, okay, thank you for the heads up, because we have these conversations with our clients pretty early on, who at your wedding are we going to have to sweet talk and really over educate on this because we're ready. And so those two uncles of hers came up to the bar and asked us a ton of questions. They were just drilling us. And it was great because we had all the answers. That's what we train our team to do. And so we had all the answers. I spoke with them from the perspective of working with physicians for the state. And they were like, oh, okay. So their attitude kind of changed. And by the end of the event, we had them rubbing CBD all over their bodies because they have chronic pain too. And they were trying vape pens, and they shook both of our hands and they said, I can't wait to go home and tell all of my patients about CBD and THC. And so that was kind of an aha moment for us, because not only did we have the opportunity to connect with those two individuals, but then the ripple effect of, their 2,000 patients each. That was a pretty cool moment, realizing that we're meeting people where they're at. They don't have to come into a dispensary. They don't have to be put into that high pressure sales environment, and you can't see through the windows, and it's a little intimidating, and you don't want to walk up to that counter and ask questions that you think are stupid. So our environment at a wedding, at an event where people are already ready to kind of cut loose a little bit, they're around family and friends, they're enjoying themselves and being social. So we are really meeting them where they are and providing that safe space and that guidance and that hand holding so that they can ask us all of those questions and they can consume at the same time. They don't have to purchase the product, go home, and then try and figure it out on their own.
Well, TK Sweets really enjoyed that story. They said that was awesome. No, that really is, like, as you're reading that, as you're telling us this, I just got chills. Like, that is the impact you are making by stepping outside of this industry. And you still support it. Just because you're not necessarily focused doesn't mean you're not a part of it. What do you have in store for the rest of 2022?
So we are working hard to expand all of our regions and really grow all of our teams, where we get double bookings, especially in Denver and Los Angeles, which are our two busiest regions. So we're focusing on growing our team, which is really amazing. We recently posted a job opening and we got over 1,000 applications. So that was really, really cool. That was a nice moment to be like, oh, people really do want to come work for us. So we are focusing on growing our team. We're also focused on connecting with more venues and more planners. Those are our ride or dies. Those are people who need our services. So we're definitely connecting with them a lot more, and researching regions like Phoenix and Chicago and Las Vegas and other branches where we can expand to with that larger staff.
Well, I'm going to put the website back on. So anyone that is interested or that has a venue or that is an event coordinator, go to Irie Weddings and eventhi.io to learn more. And that would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then let's chat a little bit about the Cannabis Impact Fund. What's that all about? How can people get involved?
Yes. So the Cannabis Impact Fund, 1% of all of Irie's cannabis bar profits go to Cannabis Impact Fund, which is run by a sister company called Cannabis Doing Good, which helps bridge the gap between the cannabis industry and the nonprofit industry. There are a ton of nonprofits that could take dollars from the cannabis industry, but they're a little scared. Our industry is a little wonky and funky and funds are just looked at differently in an unregulated way, even though they are taxed more than anybody else's. Cannabis Doing Good is really amazing for bridging that gap. And they started their sister company, Cannabis Impact Fund, which has 5 different grantees, all supporting uh, social justice, championing sustainability, focusing on a wide range of subjects, but predominantly on the cannabis industry's duty to help balance the scales when it comes to racial justice that we experience, because this industry was built on the backs of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people in the legacy market. So Cannabis Impact Fund is amazing. We love supporting them, and we definitely recommend everybody check them out.
Perfect. We have the website down below. It is cannabisimpactfund.org. And now we're going to transition to the news component. So for those that are tuning in, I will give you an overview of the article that we've chosen. And then you and I, Madlyne, will chat a little bit about it and just give our thoughts or perspectives.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So this is, oops, let me get back there. So the article of the week is called "The Waves of Cannabis Consumption Lounge Opening Up Across the U.S." Many of you know I've been keeping you all updated. Each month we have a new article about a state with a consumption lounge. And so this one is going and giving a whole overview. So a little bit about the article. After many states across the United States began adopting cannabis legislation, the stigma surrounding the use of cannabis was beginning to soften. However, there has been a lack of suitable places to consume cannabis, especially for those that live in apartments or condos or even their homes if they're not renting them. After legal obstacles regarding the indoor use of cannabis, this also then began to have a concern around equity concerns on licenses. And then the rules surrounding public consumption for businesses were finally ironed out. So now we're starting to see a lot more states start to have this discussion and start to implement some new regulations directed at cannabis consumption. A few data points. So in 2019, the path to enjoying and experiencing the lounge life was just starting to make an entrance in the cannabis industry. However, we all know around that time what happened for us all that were impacted by the pandemic. That began to shut cannabis consumption lounges down. Luckily, it didn't impact dispensaries for a while. I know for a moment we had to shut them down, but they were open back up. But consumption lounges definitely were impacted, like other venues and anything that was catered to the event landscape. Now, another couple points is in Nevada, they have the Vegas Tasting Room, which is a cannabis consumption lounge located within their extensive Nuwu cannabis marketplace. They have opened it up to tourists and locals, now stating that they are giving them a legal place to consume. In Colorado, they also have the Tetra Lounge, and they are focused on taking hospitality to the next level with daily smoke sessions and private cannabis lounges events. And then in 2019 in California, we all heard about the original Cannabis Cafe. It was named a different name before that, but they rebranded and they were the actual first legal cannabis consumption lounge in California, in West Hollywood. They were serving cannabis infused foods, and they had a traditional dispensary where you were able to order flowers, vapes, prepackages, edibles, and so forth. They're actually looking at reopening this summer. And as of right now, there are 7 U.S. states that have legislation in place for cannabis consumption lounge, with many more to follow. So we'll keep you updated on that. But I know that, you're in Colorado, so you've already kind of you guys have had cannabis consumption lounges. And overall, what has been your experience with that? What are your thoughts? Do you think this is going to become something big in any specific state?
So I think that the key that we've been missing here in Colorado for a long time has been small scale sales. Cannabis consumption lounges that are bring your own it's not like the full model, right? It's like halfway. So we've had that for a long time. And I think with the advent of delivery coming on board, we just got delivery here in Colorado. I know California's had it for a long time, but we just got that here in Colorado recently. Legislation changed. So I think the delivery component is going to be a little bit different. That really can help with that lounge feel of it being all inclusive and all, you can go there, get what you need, consume it there, versus, oh, I have to go to the dispensary, purchase it, then bring it. That just seems a little bit more cumbersome. So I think that things are going to be a little bit smoother here for sure. But it really all comes down to staff training. Is that lounge operating with a staff that knows what to do in case of overconsumption or in case of an adverse reaction? Are they having conversations with the guests, before they place their order, saying, how familiar are you with cannabis? What's your favorite way to consume, and kind of diving in with each guest? I don't know if they have the time to do it because busy cafe, you're serving multiple people. So, I think from a risk perspective, it's just a little bit different, as well as infused foods. That we all know that the duration of an edible is different than the duration of a joint, right? But even looking at the difference between a piece of chocolate or a gummy and a cookie and a brownie, the way that we can suck on a gummy or a piece of chocolate or a lozenge and have that THC be absorbed sublingually versus having to travel through our entire digestive system and it hitting 2 to 3 hours later. And, so if you're planning on being at a facility for 2 to 3 hours, great, go ahead and have that infused food. But if you're only planning on being there for an hour or so, that really, to me, doesn't function like a bar that you can walk up to, have a drink, and then leave. That doesn't make sense in my brain. So I think that drinkables are really going to be, I think they should be a way of the future as far as consumption, because it's going to hit you faster, it's going to leave you faster, and that's just a safer way to do it.
I love that. Have you been approached by some of these dispensaries or people interested in dispensaries with, maybe trying to get some understanding or maybe learn from your staff, like training lessons or anything?
That's something that we've actually really talked about. Our proprietary training that we offer our staff is incredibly detailed and it's different than serve safe. You know what I mean? It's different than sell safe. It is because people aren't just coming in to purchase something. They're coming over to the bar to consume something. So, I think that the training does need to be in these different states, need to be upgraded and updated. And that is something that we've talked about is, how can we assist and facilitate with that? Because we're one of the only companies who've served, tens of thousands of people and witnessed these types of reactions or lack thereof over and over and over again. So yeah, we definitely want to be a part of that training and implementation.
That's awesome. Well, before I let you go, that is the component of the show. And before I let you go, any last words? And yeah, how can we all support you?
You can visit irieweddings.com. If you are having an event, it can be a birthday party, product lunch party, wedding, a celebration of life, baby shower, it doesn't matter. If you would like a cannabis bar for your guests or a CBD bar for your guests, you can hire us to serve it. So you can visit us at the website there down below and get in touch with our booking agents.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me and share your insight. And it's always good speaking with you. I love our conversations. Excited to have more in the future. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. All right, everyone. Now that was a great episode, learning so much from Madlyne and what they're doing over at Irie Weddings and Events is so cool. And hopefully if you're thinking of planning a wedding or any event, as she stated, check them out, especially if you are adding a cannabis consumption component. Now, as we sum things up, so next week, we actually won't be having a show. I will be in LA offline. We have I'm also the co-founder of a event series called Blunt Brunch, and we are hosting our national event in Los Angeles. So unfortunately, the show will be missed next week. But following that, we will have Joshua Caruso, founder of Farmers Cup and the San Diego Cannabis Farmers Cup, and many more well-recognized events in Southern California. He will be joining us, and we will be diving into the Farmers Cup and what they have going on for 2022. Now, this week's event of the week is called the First Ever Terpene Tournament. The Terpene Tournament is announcing the first one ever. It says, take a trip and go on a sensory journey as you taste and savor the finest cannabis and learn about terpenes. Mingle with other like-minded guests and sip on cannabis mocktails. Sample tasty joints and dabs, all while taking in a beautiful rooftop view of Oakland. If you're interested in learning more about the event, you can visit eventhi.io and grab your tickets. It is called the First Ever Terpene Tournament. Now, with that being said, as always, I appreciate you all joining us, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay high.